Hey guys, welcome to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today is the start of a new reading vlog, which I should have started yesterday. We'll get into that in a second, but this is a reading vlog where I read Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series for the very first time. Very first time in my life. Haven't read these before. And this is going to be a reading vlog of my experience with this series. So some of you may be thinking, Jessin, you've never read Court of Thorns and Roses series? Where have you been? Have you been like sticking your head under the sand? Why have you not read this series? So I did start off my whole reading journey more in the fantasy section of romance, but by the time that A Court of Thorns and Roses came out, which I believe was in 2015, I was past my YA days. I just wasn't picking up YA anymore. I completely just left the YA scene. Naturally, I started just gravitating towards adult romance, and I just didn't have an interest in picking up YA books. So I heard about this series, and now I've heard about it a lot more since joining in on the romance booktube community. And I've definitely heard a lot more about this series since joining booktube, because I know it's a lot of people's favorite series. Everyone's highly anticipating the new book in the series that is coming out this month, and I was like, well, this is a perfect time to jump in, do a reading vlog, and see if I love it. And if I do love it, then I'll be all caught up by the time that the next book releases. I think it's like A Court of Silver Flames or something. Hold on. Yes, it is. A Court of Silver Flames. So anyway, I thought this was the perfect time to do a reading vlog. It's also Pharaoh Feb. So again, fitting in. Everything was just working out. Everything was just working out. Even though I knew that this was a popular series for a lot of my friends in the booktube community, in the book romance community, I just didn't really have an interest in picking it up. Sometimes when you pick up a book, it reads, like I think of it, I'm like, oh yeah, that reads definitely like YA. And I don't know how else to explain it than there's certain themes that are very popular in young adult romances, and I don't jive with a lot of those anymore. So I was just like, this is just one thing that I don't need to read. Not really. And since I became friends with Jen and Crystal, who both really love the series, I heard them gush about it so many times. I don't know how. I think Jennifer and I were talking about how we both love Hades and Persephone retellings, and she was like, I'm so surprised. I really think that you would like A Court of Thorns and Roses, that series, because it does have some Hades and Persephone elements in it. And I'm like, really? Tell me more. So I was like, Jen knows that I don't like spoilers, and she's like, I just want to let you know that I think that knowing your preferences, knowing your reading preferences, I think you might like this series. But I still had some hesitations. I was like, but Jen, there's this thing in YA romance that I really don't like, and I'm pretty sure that this book has it in there. I don't have a ton of information. I haven't heard a lot about the series as a whole, because in the last like 5 to 8 years, none of my friends have been reading YA romances, so nobody has read it and been like, oh, like talk to me about it. Juliet hasn't read it, so I really have very, very, very little information going in to the series, which I love. But anyway, so I had this thing where I was like, Jen, I don't know if I want to read it, because I've heard that there's a love triangle in here, because on some of the live reading sprints, people have been doing a reread of the series kind of recently within the past couple months. And I heard a couple names thrown around, be like, oh no, I like this person. Oh no, I like this person. I was like, I'm not a big love triangle person. I don't want to read that, Jen. She's like, okay. She's like, I'm going to tell you something, and maybe it'll convince you to read. So I'm going to throw out this spoiler. If you've not read A Court of Thorns and Roses series, if you don't want to be spoiled for anything, I'm going to throw up this slight spoiler right here, and then I'll go back and talk to you about my reading journey, about what I plan to do, and all that jazz. So Jen was like, there's a fated mates aspect, there's a fated mates element in this book that though there is another guy, it is very clear that there's only one man that she belongs to, that she is meant to be with. Pretty much the extent of my knowledge of this series is the names. Is the heroine's name Farah, Tamlin, and then Rhysand. I've heard this name Rhysand so many times, so I was very familiar that this was the guy that everybody was like, the majority of the people were like, this guy is it, this guy is it. So Jen was like, yeah, the other guy in the first book, you're gonna like him. He's not a bad guy at all, but Rhysand is endgame. And if you start reading it, knowing it, because sometimes I have a problem with love triangles when a love interest is introduced, the author makes you fall in love with them, and then all of a sudden it's like, psych, it's this guy actually. So I'm glad that I had that knowledge going in spoiler. Okay, so now let's talk about the books, the lovely books that I got. So this has kind of been my plan for a couple months now. I knew I wanted to read this series, and I was like, I don't know when I want to read this series. And then all of a sudden, Pharaoh Feb was announced. And it just so happened to be in the same month that the new book in the series is coming out. And it just felt very serendipitous. So I started searching, scouring the webs. At first I was like, I'm just gonna get the paperback copies. They seem like they're easier to find. I don't like the new recoverings. I'm not a fan of them. I understand why, from like a marketing aspect, that they wanted to rebrand it to put it like in the adult section. Funnily enough, in my Barnes & Noble, it's in the sci-fi section, not the adult romance section. I find it interesting. I think it's in Books A Million, it's under the romance section. So very interesting how that's categorized. But anyway, so I plan on searching for the paperback copies through like thrift books and stuff. But then I remembered that there was a beautiful set of dust jackets that came through one, I forgot what box it was from, if it was Fairy Loot or if it was Owl Crate or whatever, but there was a beautiful set of dust jackets that you can no longer buy. And I decided to try to find them to see if I could get a copy of these dust jackets, which would mean that I needed to find hardcovers of this series. And guys, if you have not looked at eBay to see what these books go for, when I first started searching, even a paperback copy went for almost $100 of just one book, just A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I was like, this is insane. But look, if you put alerts out and you like jump on them real quick, you can find a good deal. Luckily, I was able to find these 3 books with the dust jacket for a very good price, okay? Very good price. So now I get the beautiful copies. Look at that. Look at the artistry. It's just so much better. And it's not just the dust jackets. This is what makes this such a great deal. It has the original ones as well. So everything's in gorgeous condition. I was very lucky to find this. Very lucky to find this. Then I had to search a little bit for this. I had to search a little bit for this dust jacket. And I got the hard copy, the hardcover of A Court of Frost and Starlight. I still need to take this sticker off. But I like immediately went to go put this dust jacket. Now this one had never been folded. It's still kind of like flippy outy. But again, okay, so let's show them all off. So here's the first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And this is our heroine, Feyre. And I love how these dust jackets are wraparound. It's just freaking gorgeous. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. This was worth it. 1000% worth it. A Court of Mist and Fury, which is kind of my personal favorite, but blue's my favorite Blue's my favorite color. So I'm a little biased. But then we have so many other people and I'm like, who are you? Who are you? Who is this man bun dude? Don't tell me. Don't tell me. I want to find out. But like him, I'd do him. I mean, I do all of them. He's hot. She's beautiful. Love it. Anyway, A Court of Wings and a Ruin, which is very gorgeous. Stunning. Stunning. Love it. And A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is so pretty. Why is this so pretty? I just freaking love it. Oh, the back is so good. Oh, look at that. Oh. Anyway, so now that I've spent like almost 15 minutes talking about me not ever reading this before and showing off these beautiful covers, I have a confession to make. So last night I actually started A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I did start it like in the afternoon. We didn't have very great lighting, and I'm listening to these books on audio and reading at the same time and kind of like switching out between. Sometimes I'll exclusively listen to the audio if something's going on. Sometimes I'll exclusively just read no audio. Sometimes I'll do both, just depends. But I started this book last night and I was like, well, I'll just get like a head start. I'll read about a third of the way in and then I'll start the vlog tomorrow, update everyone on like where the story is. I'll have like a good chunk of information if I get a third of the way through. So this is my plan. And I accidentally read the whole thing. I stayed up until 2:30 and I read this book. And I'm not apologizing because it was so much fun, but I was messaging Jen and Crystal at like every turn. I was like, oh, this happened. Oh, this person's here. What is going on? This is my theory. And so yeah, I had a lot of fun. A lot of fun. They were like laughing at me. saying like, just you wait. Oh, yeah, not telling you. So because they know I'm anti-spoiler, I'm like, don't tell me. I'm gonna like make some predictions, but I don't want you to confirm or deny. I just want you to be like, I'm listening. That's all I need. I need them to listen. So A Court of Thorns and Roses has a lot of Beauty and the Beast vibes, which I absolutely love. I was obsessed with the 92 cartoons, one of my favorites ever. And if you've ever read Beauty by Robin McKinley, I read this book in 7th grade and I thought that this was such an interesting take on the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Come to find out, it was based on one of the original Beauty and the Beast fairy tales written in like the 1700s by a French novelist. So I fell in love with this type of storyline, and it definitely is very reminiscent of Beauty by Robin McKinley. At least Farrah's origins are very similar. So Farrah is our heroine, and she and her family are destitute, but they didn't used to be. Her father was a wealthy merchant and he lost it all. So now they are poor and they are struggling to survive. Her father's depressed that his merchant fleet sunk, sinking all of their riches. And she has 2 sisters, Nesta and Elaine, and they're not very helpful. They're not very helpful. Farrah's pretty much helping this family survive by her lonesome. She goes out into the forest to hunt to make sure that they have meat, and they haven't had meat for like a couple of days. So she goes out into the forest and she sees this stag, and it's like beautiful, and she ends up by shooting that. But then a wolf appears, and she doesn't know if this wolf is a creature from the fairylands. So this is really cool. I love the maps that are included in this. This is super amazing. So in this map, you can see, if you have a zoomed in look, that Farrah's village is that little bitty dot, and then there's a wall in the forest. I like can't reach around. I can't see. So the wall separates all the fairylands up there from the mortal area. And there's a lot of myths and legends being passed down about how the Fae used to be kind of like the rulers over the mortals. Mortals were enslaved, and some people kind of like worship the Fae now. You see this whenever Farrah and her sisters go into the market to try and sell the wolf pelt. There's these like zealots basically saying like the Fae are gonna like bless them. Farrah's just trying to survive. Also, her sister Nesta, I wanted to like, she was terrible. I was like, Nesta? No girl, you need to help around the house. Farrah can't do this all by herself. And her sister Elaine she kind of has her head in the clouds. Then this huge white wolf, this beast, busts into their house and says, murderer, who killed my friend? So Farrah finds out that the wolf that she was like, oh, he's not like a fairy, but he might be like a magical mythical creature, was actually a fairy. And so this beast has come to seek retribution. And he says there's a treaty with the Fae and the mortals, and it's basically a life for a life. If you kill an innocent fairy, then there's a life debt. So Farrah offers herself up. She's like, well, I did it, and spare my family, I'll come with you. Because he says, you can come to the Fae lands and live out your life there, but you can never return home. You see the Beauty and the Beast vibes? Love it. Farrah goes to these Fae lands, and she has so many prejudices against the Fae. She assumes that she knows a lot about them. She's basically planning her escape from the get-go. They arrive at his house, his estate, his manor. It's beautiful. Not at all what Farrah was expecting when she was thinking of, fairylands and Fae. So we go to Tamlin's house, and he says, you don't even have to technically live here. You can go live somewhere else, but I'm telling my people that they're not to harm you. I can't say the same for everybody else in other courts. So we're in the spring court right now, and he basically says, you're not a prisoner. You can roam free. But there are like some rules, because in the forest, there is a lot of creatures there, and there's something going on. And I will say that it is a bit of a slow burn, story-wise, plot-wise, in the first half of the book. I didn't mind it because I felt like Farrah needed to be eased in to this world. She needed to be eased in, and her preconceptions about the Fae, she definitely needed time to come to terms with not everything that she assumes is true. And I really like that. I really like how that plays out. Lucian is another fae that we meet very early on, and he has one like mechanical gold eye. Very interesting, that backstory. But Feyre is kept in the dark about a lot of things. And one thing to note, everybody in the spring court has these masks on, and you can see Tamlin in his mask, his gold mask. And it's part of like, hi Ollie, what you doing? What you doing now, buddy? Are you interested? Oh. Are we done with scratches? Gonna lay down now? Okay, he's gonna do his thing in the background. So we find out that there was this curse, that things have been acting up in Fairy. I keep calling this Fairy. It has a name, Prithian. Fae magic has been acting up for a few years now, and Feyre wants more information. Tamlin is not forthcoming with a lot of this information. Lucian does reveal that there was this masquerade ball, and that when the magic started acting up, it cursed them to never be able to take off those masks, and it only happened in the spring court. So little by little, Feyre is just learning about the Fae, but she knows that something is going on because she overhears whispers. She overhears that this, like, oh, we can't let her know, she'll know. So this she is a very mysterious she that we don't find out the identity of for a very long time in the book. I didn't mind that because there's a little romance going on between Feyre and Tamlin. One of my favorite scenes happens during the spring solstice ceremony. Tamlin's like, you have to stay in your room. There's going to be more fairies than usual out and about, and don't come out until morning. Of course, Feyre doesn't listen. She goes into the forest because she's hearing all these drums, and she sees so many fairies, hundreds of fairies. And she thought that there weren't that many in this area. She's approaching this cave. She wants to see what everybody else is looking at. But these three high fae grab her arm. They don't have masks on, so they're not from the spring court, and kind of drag her towards the forest. But she's saved by this mysterious fae. And I knew. I messaged both Jen and Crystal, and I was like, I think I met Rhysand. Like, I'm pretty sure I met him. And he's definitely my vibe. Dark hair, dresses in black. I like him. Already liked him from that moment on. So he kind of saves her. But Lucian's like, hey, you can't be here. Because Lucian is going to be like infused with magic. He's not going to be himself. He's going to turn into this hunter. And he has to seek the maiden. And if he smells you, he's going to come after you. And he's not going to take no for an answer. So you need to go back now. And he needs to be able to like choose someone else and not you. You're not ready for this. You're not ready for this. Feyre reluctantly goes home. She's like, am I jealous? I'm kind of jealous that, you know, Tamlin's gonna be with somebody else tonight. And she does come out earlier than the morning. So a little after midnight, the drums have stopped beating, so she knows that the ceremony's pretty much over. And she runs into Tamlin, and he's a little bit feral. And it's very exciting, and he bites her neck, and I'm just like, this is so good, it's so fun. Anyway, it's been all fun and games. They've been falling in love, Tamlin and Feyre have been falling in love for the first half of this book, but then Rhysand shows up. And we find out a lot more information after he shows up a second time. So Rhysand is from the Night Court, and we find out that he is like the lover of Amarantha, who is this evil queen that has sort of enslaved all of the high lords of all of the courts. She's the reason why the spring court is wearing the mask. Now that Rhysand knows Feyre's identity, well, at least he knows that this is a human that Tamlin has fallen in love with, and that's a big problem because Amarantha really wants Tamlin because Tamlin has told her no before. So in order to ensure that Feyre survive, Tamlin decides to send her back to the mortal realm, back beyond the wall. And he's like, don't come back. This is gonna get ugly. So Feyre does go back home. Her family has been taken care of because Tamlin put a glamour on her family so that they would think that she was going to visit this long lost wealthy aunt and sent back like a lot of money. So when she meets her family, they have like riches galore. And Tamlin sends her back in this carriage that has like a ton of jewels and gold and dresses and all kind of things. So now their status has been reinstated. Interestingly enough, the glamour that Tamlin put on the family has not worked on Nesta. And we find out that Nesta has actually tried to get Feyre back, which was very unexpected because I was like, this girl's a bitch. So I was like, very interested to see that turn of events, that Nesta thought that it was completely not right that Feyre had to sacrifice herself for her family. And so she tried to rescue her. And so Feyre gets to confide everything in Nesta, tell her all about what happened. Then they hear about this family that they used to know. And the girl was kidnapped and the house was burned down and all the family died. And Feyre realizes that this girl, this name, was the name that she gave to Rhysand when he asked, "Who are you?" And she knew she didn't want to give out her real name. She didn't want to put her family in danger. So she said another name, another girl who just sprang to mind. So now she's like, this is my fault. Something bad must be happening if the Fae were able to cross the wall, because you have to cross through the spring court. And yeah, I gotta go figure out what's going on. So she decides to go back across the wall to go and see if Tamlin's all right. She arrives at the manor house and it is just, it's a mess. And she sees Alice, who was a maid who kind of like helped her dress, like a lady's maid type of thing. And she says, "I can't believe you're back, and we're now aware of this curse that is specific to Tamlin." We get more information. This is where the story gets super interesting. I love it. Alice informs Feyre that the curse is very specific to Tamlin, that Tamlin was given 49 years to reconsider Amarantha's offer to be like her consort or whatever. And he had 49 years to find a human woman who had hate in her heart for the Fae and killed a Fae in cold blood, and then would learn to love Tamlin. And she had to say, "I love you" to Tamlin before the 49 years were out. So Tamlin was sending his people across the wall, hoping that this girl would kill one of his men so that he would know, oh, this is the girl from the prophecy. So when Feyre kills his friend, and Feyre thinks back to that moment, which I originally thought, I'm like, this scene is playing out so long, it's being dragged out so long. But when you think about it again, Feyre's like, that wolf really did just stand still. After I shot him with my ash arrow, he just let me shoot him in the eye. What was up with that? And now we have that information. He was 100% aware of the prophecy, and he just let Feyre kill him. And Feyre realizes that when Tamlin packed her up in the carriage and he told her, "I love you," and she was like, I can't say it back to him, because she was so stunned that he told her that, and she was so like overcome with emotions, but she knew she would never be able to see him again, and that she just needed to kind of like forget about him, because he promised that he would come find her. But she was like, I know that he lied. I know that this is pretty much goodbye. So she ended up by not saying "I love you." Now she's like, if I would have only said "I loved you," I could have broken this curse, and he would not be in the clutches of Amarantha right now. So she decides that she is going to go to Amarantha's court, and Amarantha is under the mountain, literally under the mountain. When Feyre gets there, Amarantha is very sadistic, and there's this whole backstory with Amarantha's sister who fell in love with the human betrayed her, and all kind of jazz, and that's why she put that curse on Tamlin. Feyre bargains with Amarantha, saying, "I want to free him. What do I need to do?" And Amarantha says, you're going to have 3 trials. 3 trials where if you survive my trials, then he will be free. I will let him go. Or I'll even put a loophole in here for you. I'll give you a riddle. And if you solve this, if the trials become too much for you, and if you can solve this riddle, that's also a way to win this. So the riddle, Feyre's like, yeah, I have no idea what that means. Also of note, Feyre was never educated to read and write, because she was pretty young when her father got disgraced, and priority was survival and not like her education. So she cannot read, and this becomes a big part of the trials for the second trial. The first trial with the worm, it was very thrilling. I was very excited. And there's a moment where she falls into the pit and she decides to make this trap. And we can hear like the Fae being like, what is she doing? And we hear Rhysand's voice, and he says, she's making a trap. And I'm like, he's admiring her. He's admiring her cunning, her wit. I just love it. I love it. Anyway, she's pretty beat up after this first trial, okay? Pretty beat up. Oh, and Amarantha had beat her up right whenever she got to court. Lucien healed her, but Lucien ended up by shouting a little helpful hint during this first trial with the killer worm. And Feyre has been in this jail cell for days and days and days. A fever has set in. She's pretty much dying. Her arm is mangled. It's probably festering. She's probably septic. And Rhysand materializes in her cell and says, I'll make you a deal. I'll heal you because let's think about this logically. Lucien may not be able to get to you in time before you die. He's being watched. He's being tortured. I can heal you, but I want a bargain. And he asked for 2 weeks out of the month that she would have to come to the night court every single month for the rest of her life. She bargains it down and it's 1 week a month. So she agrees. And when they make this bargain, Rhysand grasps her hand and this inky black lacy tattoo pretty much inks itself into her skin. And she has like an eye on the palm of her hand. She's like, what is this? And he's like, I forgot to tell you. This is like a thing in the night court. So luckily, thank goodness this happens, because the second trial involves Feyre being able to read a riddle. And she has to pick the right lever to answer the question, or else these spikes of doom are going to crash down on her and Lucien. This little lacy tattoo allows Rhysand to talk to her, and he helps her figure out which one is the right lever. And I love this moment so much because she is broken. She thought she was going to die. She thought she was going to get Lucien killed because Lucien is also right there. And her inability to read, such a simple thing for the majority of people, was something that she couldn't do. And it almost broke her. And Rhysand was like, you cannot let her. Show her. See how she has gotten to you. You can't look like a broken woman. Like, straighten your back. Dry your tears. Stare at her down. It was such a beautiful moment. I really loved it. Then the third trial comes in. Oh, and there is a moment where we find out that, because she's there for about 3 months, because the trials always happen during the full moon, and Rhysand keeps bringing her out to these celebrations, painting her body and dressing her up in these like very sheer outfits so that he's basically like tormenting Tamlin, showing him she's made a deal with me to come to the night court once for a whole week every single month. And this body paint allows Rhysand to know if anybody has touched her, and it's very like the Mummy with the Noxuna moon in her paint. And anyway, I thought that was cool. But Rhysand definitely shows his possessive side because he's like, I don't share what's mine. And I'm like, ooh. Anyway, I was really excited by that. The third trial, Amarantha says, you must kill these 3 fae. These 3 fae are brought in, 3 high fae. They're hooded. And she's like, if you want to free Tamlin, and Tamlin's like sitting right next to her, then you have to kill these 3 fae to release him. And Feyre is struggling with this so bad because it's not just about freeing Tamlin. If she wins, Rhysand has told her that Tamlin is powerful enough to kill Amarantha outright. And so if she is able to set Tamlin free, then Amarantha is most likely going to die. Everybody in Prythian would get their full powers back. So it's basically like for the good of the realm. And she is struggling so bad. And she kills her first one. And she is like, oh my God, what have I done? She's struggling so much. The second girl is pretty resigned and pretty much telling her with her eyes, do it quick, make it fast, do it. Like, it's okay. The third one, she removes the hood and it's Tamlin. And Amarantha's like, haha, you have to kill him. And we see that the Tamlin by her side is not really Tamlin. Feyre remembers this advice that Alice has given her, saying like, you need to listen, you have the information that you need. And she has remembered a couple times where Tamlin was referred to as having a stone heart. And so she's like, I really hope I'm right. She stabs him in the heart and it doesn't kill him because she like clinks on like a stone something in his chest. Amarantha goes ballistic because she did not think that she would try to kill Tamlin, who she claims that she's in love with. Like, you're not going to kill him, you're in love with him. The High Fae are all like, she did it. She completed the trial. You have to let Tamlin go. And Amarantha's like, hell no, and starts torturing Feyre. And Rhysand, interestingly enough, is in the background trying to get to her. I find that interesting. Amarantha kills Feyre. Tamlin goes ballistic and kills Amarantha. And then it's like this bond, this tattoo that Feyre has creates this bond with Rhysand. We saw it in the second trials that she could hear his voice. But then when she dies, it's like she is seeing everything through Rhysand's eyes. She's seeing her body prone on the floor. And she sees every high lord of the Fey court come in and drop this like sparkly little thing on her. Basically, they resurrect her, and now she is a high Fae, which is so cool. I'm so excited about it. And then the most interesting thing of all, so her and Tamlin are reunited. If you have not figured this out, I'm already team Rhysand because I'm aware that there is a fated mate aspect between Rhysand and Feyre. So I'm glad that I had that information because I love Tamlin. I want him to be happy. I don't want him to be hurt, but I'm all for Rhysand. They have a moment when Feyre goes meet Rhysand on the top of the mountain, and they have a moment and they talk, and she feels changed. These trials, especially that last trial, she carries so much guilt because of it, and I love that she's suddenly a different species now, and she's dealing with the heavy weight of that, having to carry those lives that she has taken for the greater good, but it's weighing on her. And now she has this bargain with Rhys where she has to go to his court for 1 week for every month. They have a moment and Rhys tells her, well, actually, the quote is in the back of the book. It says, "Be glad of your human heart, Feyre. Pity those who don't feel anything at all." So he's trying to like reassure her. And then he's like fading. He's like ready to go to the night court. And then there's this moment where he looks at her and he like freezes. And then all of a sudden he disappears. And Feyre's like, what was that about? And I'm like, he just recognized her as his fated maid. Oh my God. Okay, anyway, freaking out. It was amazing. I really loved it. I don't know what to rate it yet because of the slowness of the first half. I did not enjoy it, but if I wasn't listening to it on audio, I think it would have taken me a longer time to finish the book because I probably would have like set it down and done other things. So I'm not going to rate it quite yet. I'm going to finish the other books in the series and then I'm going to rate them, which is going to be exciting. So I finished The Court of Thorns and Roses at 2:30 in the morning last night, and I immediately opened up the next book. It's like I have to find out what's happening. Obviously, this is Rhysand, and this is Feyre with her new little elf ears, not elf ears, Fae ears. And yeah, I'm really excited to read this book, but I only let myself read the first chapter. And I was messaging Jen this morning. She was like, girl, you need to start your vlog. I'm like, I know. No. So anyway, here's the start of the vlog. In the first chapter, it's been 3 months since the events of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Feyre has not been called by Rhysand at all to go to the night court, and she's just kind of like, okay. We feel how heavy Feyre is feeling. She feels so much guilt, and Tamlin has proposed. So she's planning this wedding, but she's not really planning this. There's another high priestess character that we're introduced to named Ianthe, and Ianthe is pretty much taking the reins for the wedding because Feyre doesn't really care to pick out flowers, doesn't really care about the dress, doesn't really care about the ceremony. Of course, she's happy that she's able to be with Tamlin, but they're both reliving their nightmarish experience that they had under the mountain. So you can tell things are just not the same. And I'm waiting for Rhysand to like call in this bargain. I'm excited. So anyway, like I said, I've only read 2 chapters so far, and I'm gonna try to update you guys as I read this book. I'm gonna make my predictions, the crazy predictions that I send to Jen and Crystal. You guys who've already read this series are probably gonna laugh and be like, oh my god, she's so off. But anyway, it's fun. This is fun. This is a fun vlog. And I'm really excited that I started this series. I'm really glad that I started this series, so yay. I'll let you guys know whenever I read more in the book. All right, guys, it's time for an update. I'm currently reading this lovely, lovely book. And before I jump in to like what's happening, where I'm at, I'm about like, I don't know, probably about 1/4 of the way through. I mean, I guess I can consult my Kindle and it'll tell me, but I'm assuming 1/4 of the way through A Court of Mist and Fury. And yeah, I can't wait to start talking about the stuff that's happening already. But first and foremost, this is one of my favorite covers. I think I've already said that. And I officially know who everyone is on the back of this now. And I'm really excited. I was telling Jen and Crystal, I was like, okay, I'm really interested to find out who these people are. I don't think I've met them. And this guy with the man bun, he's doing it for me. Who is this? So anyway, I'm really enjoying this. So, oh, and also, I think it kind of goes without saying, this is going to be like a spoiler vlog for this book. I'm not going to like talk around the events of what's happening. So if you've not read A Court of Thorns and Roses, and if you've not read this book, then don't watch because I'm talking about like specific scenes and my reaction to specific scenes, my predictions for the rest of the book. So yeah, spoiler vlog, I'm going into details. Okay, you're warned. So at the beginning of this book, we find out that Farah and Tamlin are engaged. And I already know. I'm like, okay, so Rhysand is Farah's fated mate. This wedding can't happen, correct? And I find it so interesting. So something really funny about reading these books, when I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, I binged that book. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna read halfway and then continue on the next day. And I was like, nope, go straight through. This one, I am intentionally savoring because the reading experience for A Court of Mist and Fury is a lot different than A Court of Thorns and Roses because the world is already established and something major has happened in the heroine's life. And it has really affected her. And from the very first chapter, you see the effects of the trials that Amarantha has put on Farah. And killing those two fae, those two innocents, has affected Farah, and she is extremely depressed. And I think that SJM has done a fantastic job at depicting depression and how it feels, the weight that Farah is feeling, and also the apathy, because she was a fiery heroine. In A Court of Thorns and Roses, she was fiery. She would fire back if Tamlin or Lucien said something. She was quick to say something back to them or call them out on their behavior. Now it's like she can't summon the energy and she would rather just go sleep. And it's just so sad to see her this way, but also I'd expect something huge and life-changing like that to have an impact on my character, and so I like seeing it. I don't like to see her suffer, but I like seeing this development, and I'm excited to see the changes that this is going to cause. Honestly, one of the things that makes this reading experience so special is because I message Jen and Crystal both constantly while I'm reading. I'll like read a couple pages and then I'll message and I'll be like, oh my god, is this? And I love like telling them my thoughts and my predictions. I'm like, what if this is gonna happen? What if this is gonna happen? And they don't tell me anything. They're just like, interesting that you say that. They won't tell me anything because I don't want spoiler reviews. I don't want confirmation. It's just how I like to consume my media. I do this for movies as well. I'm always like, ooh, I bet you that would happen. What if it would be so cool if this happened? So anyway, when I first read the very first page and it was discussing how Farah was planning her wedding, but she's really not the one planning it. It's Ianthe, the high priestess that we meet in the beginning. And Ianthe's the one that's making all the decisions. Farah really doesn't care. She's just like, I just want to be married to Tamlin. I don't care about this wedding ceremony. I don't care about the dress, or I actually kind of hate the dress. Ianthe has picked it out. So what's so sad about it? A wedding to somebody that you love. It's supposed to be like the most joyous day of your life, one of them. And for this, it's just something for Farah to like get it over and done with. It doesn't feel special. It doesn't feel special. Farah and Tamlin's relationship is very interesting because they've both gone through something. They've both gone through a trauma, different types of trauma, but you can tell the effect that it has had on them. They both have nightmares, but the interesting part of it is that they don't talk to each other about it. It's almost like they want to sweep it under the rug and not think about those nightmarish events because they think it'll make it worse, but what they're doing is actually making it worse, pretending it didn't happen, trying to go back to the way things were, and you just can't do that. There's one moment where Farah is observing, there's a lot of fae coming over, and she's observing Tamlin talking to some of his friends. And she's just on the outskirts, not really wanting to mingle, not wanting to socialize with people. She doesn't really have friends. She considers Ianthe, the high priestess, one of the only people that she's friends with. And she feels like she's on the outskirts of things. And she's happy that Tamlin is experiencing this joy, this lightness, these light moments, but it's so isolating that she's the one that's feeling like this. She feels so alone. But on the other hand, she feels like she should be grateful that she survived this and that she's back at the spring court and things are going back to normal, she feels like she's ungrateful, and she also feels a little bit unclean, unworthy. Oh my goodness, these thoughts that Feyre is having, it's just so heartbreaking, but I'm excited for her development for this book. Like, it gives me all the excite to see this character development. This is the type of character development that I love. We're really exploring Feyre and her adjusting to life as a high fae. Like, she is an immortal now. It's been 3 months. She's made a deal with Rhysand, and he has not collected on it yet. And I told Jen, I was like, he's gonna come collect it before she gets married, like the week of her wedding. And guess what? The day of her wedding to Tamlin, the second that she's walking down the aisle and she spots the red rose petals mixed in with the other flowers, she immediately starts having a panic attack. She has post-traumatic stress disorder and she can't do it. And she feels like she's unworthy to have Tamlin. And she's looking at all these other guests and like, what do they think of me? I murdered one of their own. She feels so hopeless and helpless. And so she is in this wedding dress that she absolutely loathes, surrounded by people that she doesn't know. And she's frozen on the aisle. Tamlin's holding out his hand, being like, Feyre, come on. And she is internally screaming, help me, somebody save me from this. And who shows up but Rhysand? And I was just like, yes. And he's just so flip about it all. Just like, oh, am I interrupting something? I love it. I love it. And something that me and Jen were talking about, and she mentioned this to me, and I'm just like, that's exactly what this is. The way that his attitude is played out in this scene, he doesn't mind being the bad guy because Feyre is choking up. She's about to tell Tamlin that she can't go through with this wedding because of her feelings of unworthiness and uncleanliness. She just does not feel like, she doesn't feel right about it. And Rhysand is like, okay, I'm collecting her. She needs to come to the night court now. And even though he's getting under Tamlin's skin, his main priority is getting her out. And so he takes her, and their conversation, Rhysand is very irreverent, and he doesn't treat Feyre like she's made of glass. He pushes her buttons because he's wanting to see that fiery side of her. He's looking for that part of her that's buried deep down inside, beyond this depression. And he's telling her, you look ridiculous, take that dress off. And she does get angry and annoyed, and she's like, I hate him. And like, you know that she doesn't actually hate him, but also they have actually experienced this trauma. He knows more about what she's experienced than Tamlin knows, because Rhysand has seen her dying of sepsis in the dungeons. He's watched her struggle with this. He's been in her mind during the second trial when she was, lost all hope and was in deep despair about not being able to save Lucian. And you can really tell that Rhysand is trying to be very proactive about healing her. And the best way to bring out some emotion in her is aggravating her. And she definitely does get aggravated. She takes off one of her shoes and chucks it at his head, and it hits him really hard because now she's immortal. She has some strength. And he remarks, interesting. Since she was brought back to life by all of the 7 High Lords of Prythian, nobody really knows what she's capable of. And this is the first that he is really seeing that she's having some sort of transference from the High Fae, from the High Lords, and it's very interesting, just like Rhysand says. I find it very telling that one of the first things that he tells her to do, besides rest and recuperate, is I'm gonna teach you how to read. Like, this is priority. And also, you need to be able to shield, because if you don't want me to know things because you've been waking me up in the middle of the night with your nightmares, do you think that I like being awakened to see you vomit? And again, it doesn't sound like he's helping any, but he really is, because he's pushing her to want to get better, to make her realize that she is helpless, but she doesn't need to be. And he's willing to give her the tools to do it. So she spends the entire week copying sentences that Rhysand has set out for her to copy over and over and over again to get better at writing, to get better at reading. I love these sentences that he provides, like Rhysand is the most handsome High Lord. It's just really funny. Rhysand is the best lover. It's just hilarious. And she's just like, ugh, but she writes them anyway. When she returns to Tamlin, he immediately starts interrogating her. And I understand this because he's like, nobody's been in the night court. I need to know what's going on. Feyre kind of feels like, I don't want to be, like, this feels like an interrogation. I don't want to be telling you this. Like, you haven't seen me for a week. Let's, I don't know, spend some time together. But then she also feels ungrateful, and she doesn't want to feel like she's more loyal to Rhysand than she does to Tamlin. So she's kind of forcing herself, like, yes, this is what you should be. This is, your reaction should be that you would want to share all this information with the love of your life. And when Feyre brings up that Rhysand told her that she has powers and she should need to train because a war is coming, and what if she exercised her abilities and got so good at it that she could protect her family? Because it's a very real possibility that the king of Hybern is going to want to not only attack Prythian, but also take over the mortal realm, enslave humans again, which means her family's in danger. So wouldn't you want to utilize all of your abilities to be able to prevent that from happening? And Tamlin's response is, it's more dangerous to train you than it is to not explore those powers. He doesn't want to risk it because he thinks that it will attract the attention of other High Lords, and it's just so obvious that Tamlin is trying to jump right back in to being the High Lord, but he has gone through a trauma. He doesn't know how to best help Feyre, and in his mind, it's making sure that she is safe, well guarded, protected, that nobody could ever, you know, take her away from him again. And in the sense that he doesn't want her to be thrown in a dungeon like she was with Amarantha and used as a pawn, as a tool against him again. And I understand that, but his deep need to protect this drive in Tamlin, that Lucian is also kind of like, okay, I'll talk to him. He's acting unreasonable, but you have to understand, you know, what it was like for him to watch you. And I get it. I sympathize. I like Tamlin as a character. But he's so blind to how this affects Feyre. She just wants to get out there. She wants to go with him to go patrol the borders. And he's like, it's not safe. Stay inside. And she just feels so useless. Like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Stay inside? Wear pretty dresses? Like, this is not a life. This is a half-life. And after her second time that she goes to the night court and she returns, Tamlin is not happy, and he enforces more guards where he had relaxed last time. This time he enforces them. Feyre is experiencing more, you know, instances where she is like, oh my goodness, is this a new power that she was in Lucian's mind for a second, just like Rhysand is able to get into her mind and she's able to get into Rhysand's mind. She was able to see into Lucian's mind and she's like, oh my goodness, this is an accident. That was a violation. She needs to learn how to control these things. And Tamlin's response, when she insists that she wants to help, that she wants to go out, that she wants to be useful, to hunt, to fight, Tamlin puts wards around the house, that she cannot exit the house at all through any entrance or exit, window, door, whatever. There is a barrier. And so she understandably has a horrible reaction to this. She feels like the walls are closing in on her. She has a severe panic attack. Since Feyre has this bond with Rhysand, he's able to feel that, like she's screaming out to him. And he breaks the wards, and Mor, who I forgot to say that we met Morgan, and I really like it. I like Celtic myths as well, so that's very interesting. And Mor comes inside to kind of like skirt the rules to come fetch her so that it wasn't Rhysand himself coming in to the house to take her away. And it was very telling because Feyre's kind of like lady's maid, Alice, was telling Mor like, please help her, take care of her. Because everyone can see that Feyre is wasting away. Rhysand brings her back to the night court, to her room, and he's just like, what has happened? Like, you have lost so much weight. What is going on? Like, please tell me how I can help you. And he tells her, you don't have to go back. Like, this is not part of our bargain. You're in the night court, and you're here of your own volition. If you want to stay, you don't have to. I won't let anyone come take you back. And she decides that she was pushed too far. And she says, I can't go back there. She feels unsafe now. She feels unsafe going back there. and it's very understandable. She feels safer at the night court than she does at the spring court. And now Rhysand is opening up a little bit. Opening up about his inner circle, taking her to this city that was hidden throughout the entire reign of Amarantha and has remained untouched. They were not under the control of Amarantha. They did not live under the mountain for those 49 years. They were completely safe and were unaware of how he did it. And I can't wait to find out. So the city of Starlight, Velaris, she is now made aware of this city, and he tells her, you cannot let anybody know, because he knows that Feyre has been telling Tamlin that Tamlin has been interrogating her, but he's like, this is something that you can't tell. Like, you have to make a decision. If I'm bringing you here, then you're knowingly going to be privy to something that you cannot reveal to anybody else. Like, I won't risk this. And she agrees. So she goes, and he takes her around the city, and I think that it's very interesting because Feyre is able to see Rhysand in kind of like a different setting, where as before under the mountain, everybody whispered behind his back, threw insults at him, called him Amarantha's whore, and also feared him because he has this immense power where he can just use these phantom claws to dig into your mind and like basically just kill you without a thought, with barely twitching a muscle. But in Velaris, he knows everybody's name, and everyone's glad to see him. They're happy to see him, and it's just like a new view of Rhysand. And again, there's this moment where I think that depression's so perfectly illustrated. Not that I have any personal experience with depression, but I just think that I'm like, oh, I totally understand what's happening in her mind, because she's in the artist's quarter, and she notices that she was once like these people that are walking around with paint on their hands and enjoying the beautiful sunset, like stopping to admire. And she used to see these scenes and want to immediately paint them. If we reflect back on A Court of Thorns and Roses, like she did that all the time. But now she looks at the sunset and she knows it's beautiful, but she has no desire, no drive to put, paintbrush to canvas. She's just, her light is like gone. And the whole purpose of this is to try to rekindle that. So I'm like, Rhysand, save her. They go to dinner, and this is the scene where I'm at right now. Like, I'm catching up to exactly where I am. They go to dinner, and because he has two houses and one's like on the mountain, and he flies her there. But there's a really important scene, and I actually like stopped right here on purpose because this is something that I want to quote, because it was so beautiful and telling, and I was just like, yes. Okay, so anyway, so Rhysand tells her, you say one thing that's on your mind, and I'll say something too. He proceeds to tell her 3 things that are on his mind, really opens up, really has a vulnerable moment with her. And at first she wasn't going to say anything, but then it's like you can see her bravery in opening up to somebody and admitting something that she was too afraid to admit to herself until this moment. And it's beautiful. It's so freaking good. So Feyre says, I'm thinking that I must have been a fool in love to allow myself to be shown so little of the spring court. I'm thinking that there's a great deal of the territory I was never allowed to see or hear about, and maybe I would have lived in ignorance forever like some pet. I'm thinking that I was a lonely, hopeless person, and I might have fallen in love with the first thing that showed me a hint of kindness and safety. And I'm thinking maybe he knew that, maybe not actively, but maybe he wanted to be that person for someone. And maybe that worked for who I was before. Maybe it doesn't work for what I am now. And I'm like, yes. So I want to kind of discuss this because I know that I went in knowing that Rhys and Feyre had like a fated mates aspect to their relationship, and so I was already anticipating his arrival on the scene. That doesn't mean that I didn't like Tamlin. I really loved Tamlin, and I think that Tamlin was the guy that she needed at that moment. I think that Tamlin, with his courtly manners, and he was just the type of guy that she needed to fall for first. He needed to be the one to introduce her to Fairy because Rhysand is way too blunt and too sarcastic. In A Court of Thorns and Roses, she needed to fall in love with Prythian, and she needed to bond with its people. She had a lot of prejudices going in against all of the Fae. All of the myths and legends and horror stories that she's heard, she needed all of those to be kind of debunked to a certain extent because there are some horrible fae, as we know from Amarantha. But she needed to experience that like lightness and beauty, and that's why the first half of A Court of Thorns and Roses is so slow, is because she needs to become empathetic, sympathetic to the fae. And part of that is falling in love with Tamlin. He's the golden boy. And that was a great first love for her to have. But like she said, she's a lot different than she was then. And even then, even if she didn't go through that trauma, would she have been content in that simple lifestyle that she was experiencing already at Tamlin's court? You can see the contrast, especially when Rhys is talking to his inner circle, how informal they are and how formal Tamlin's court is. That whole tithing ceremony, which I'll get to, well, let's talk about it now. That tithing ceremony. Tithing is like taxes. Everybody's supposed to pay their taxes. But Feyre witnesses this water nymph or wraith, and she doesn't have food to feed herself, and so she obviously can't pay the tithe. And Tamlin's just like, you have 3 days to pay it, and if not, next time it needs to be double. And Feyre is just like, she sees herself in that water nymph, and it's like, I know what it's like to be starving. This is completely unfair. And Tamlin's response is that this is the way it's always been done. This is how my grandfather did it. My father did it. I don't understand that response from Tamlin though, because Tamlin was talking about his father in the first book and how horrible of a person he was and how he mistreated humans and how Tamlin didn't want to be like that. So I'm confused as to why he's falling back into, this is the tradition, this is the way it's always been done. It's like, you're the High Lord, you can do whatever you want, you can change things. But it's that added pressure, I guess, with being kind of like one of the younger High Lords and wanting to protect your borders. But again, it's just, in Feyre's mind, it looks very unsympathetic and like he doesn't understand her. So she gives the jewelry to that wraith, and she tells Tamlin, like, what use do I have for these jewels? I don't even wear them twice. Like, what do you care? They mean nothing to me. I think it's going to come into play later. I'm glad that she gave her those jewels. I think it'll come in handy to have made a friend like that. But Tamlin and Feyre are just in two totally different places of their life, and I think that she would not have thrived in the Spring Court, and she really has not seen hardly anything of the Spring Court at all. But here she is in the Night Court, and she's seeing so much more. She's being included. She's not being coddled. She's being told what might happen, even though it might be scary. Rhysand is including her so that she can be prepared, and also giving her the tools that she needs to protect herself. Whereas Tamlin's just like, I'll be your protection. Rhys is like, I won't let anything happen to you, but here is also some weapons to defend yourself with. And that's the difference, and that's why I am very much Team Rhysand, because I can see the potential. I can see this relationship building and blossoming. And I also really love how now that Feyre has been introduced to his inner circle, to Cassian, to Azriel, and to Amren, I believe, which she sounds freaking cool and badass, and I'm just like, what exactly is she? What was she before? Because she mentions that, like, I've met like one other person that was something else before we were High Fae. So extremely interesting. We're getting some backstory on Rhysand's earlier life, how he grew up, that he's half Illyrian, what that means for Cassian and Azriel, and I freaking love it. I freaking love it. Azriel is like so broody. Yeah, so that's the part that I'm at. That dinner scene, that's where I'm at. And I'm going to continue to read, but I had to update you guys. I mean, like, this clip alone, I'm only 1/4 of the way into this book, is going to be so long. This whole vlog is going to be so long, and I'm sorry about that, but I need to vlog all of my thoughts. Another thing of note, when I was first introduced to Ianthe, I was like, oh, this is cool. High Priestess. She seems like she's nice, even though she's not understanding that Feyre is just not interested in this wedding, and I don't like how Ianthe's picking everything for her. But I also was kind of excited because I'm like, okay, so I know that Feyre's going to eventually end up with Rhysand, but I don't want Tamlin to be sad. He needs somebody. I'm like, maybe Ianthe. But now she's being shady. Ianthe's being shady. Rhys doesn't like her, thinks that she has some ulterior motives. And it was very interesting to note when Rhys appeared during the wedding to take Feyre the first time, Ianthe's reaction was interesting. Her eyes widened, she was freaking out, and she disappears. And I'm just like, what is that? Does she know that Rhys and Feyre are mates? Can she sense that somehow? Or is there some sort of like, I don't know, a prophecy or something that she's heard? Because she's really trying to push Feyre and Tamlin together really hard. And I'm just wondering if there's something that she's trying to avoid by keeping Feyre and Rhys together. Not that she actively has tried, but I don't know. I'm just like, I'm speculating. This is how I do. This is how I do. So anyway, guys, I will update you some more on this. Probably not until the halfway mark. Maybe not even to the, well, it depends on what happens. It depends if a lot of things happen, because I feel like a lot of things have happened in this first fourth of the book. All right, I'll update you guys later.